The Nintendo Switch 2 is finally here. And if there's one game that's needed this console desperately, it's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, a game that has had a very infamous history of issues plaguing speedruns to the point where we completely gave up on them on the Switch 1 and expected some very minor changes to happen on the Switch 2. But little did the Pokemon speedrunning community know that they were about to be given one of the most unexpected gifts they could ask for, a way to bring back Pokemon Scarlet and Violet speedruns in the best way possible. As folks like me on the other side of the world were standing in line to grab their Switch 2 pre-orders, longtime Pokemon speedrunner Crisisaurus was laying any doubts of how powerful the Nintendo Switch 2 is. As each hour of gameplay passed, Crisisaurus shaved more and more time, starting with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then 20 minutes, until the dust settled at a ridiculous 30 minutes of time save over the course of 5 hours of gameplay, shattering Scarlet and Violet's final hour barrier in the Japanese speedrunning category. And with this new standard for speedruns being put into play, many questions were raised among the community, like how much time is actually being saved from the Switch 2 console itself? How much faster or slower is the game in Japanese compared to English? And would it be possible to break the sub 5 hour barrier in the English category as well? So in order to answer many of these questions, let's compare the differences between Switch 1 and 2 Scarlet and Violet speedruns in a side-by-side comparison. With Scarlet and Violet on the Switch 1, every little strategy we've developed for the last 2 years revolved around getting less lag. If you look away from the ground for 1 second, try to fly to big cities too many times, watch a Pokeball zoom into the ground, or experience the tiniest bit of rain, it all adds up to magnitudes of time loss. As more and more content, DLC, and patches came out for Scarlet and Violet on the Switch 1, the slower speedruns became with things like unexpectedly long loading times inside of the poison base that could last up to 5 minutes and kill a run on the spot. But now, not only are these unexplained issues seemingly fixed, but we will likely have to retime and restructure the entire speedrun route from scratch with this Switch 2 experience in mind. We have noticed a few tiny hiccups here and there. The Nintendo Switch 2 version of Scarlet Violet brought about an increased frame rate, better load times, and a beautiful overworld that can be safely looked at without the fear of time loss. And that right there is what truly has brought about the Switch 2 speedrun revolution, because the entire speedrun revolves around all those things I just listed functioning properly, as the fastest speedrun strategy is to go around the game's open world, skillfully grabbing experience candies in hard to reach spots, overlevel your Pokemon with them, then fly back to important locations to plow through all the game's fights one after another. And that basic strategy will absolutely not be changing whatsoever. But with the load times being faster than ever, the path we take to reach those goals is where the restructuring is set to occur. This will probably take another week or two to develop, so be sure to subscribe and I'll be making an update video to this one, as well as covering other Pokemon speedrun stories in the future. But what we do know is that among all these fixes is a slew of issues from the Switch 2 itself and its updates to the game that have been causing problems for the speedrunning scene. The first big issue is that we can't actually play older patches from the Nintendo Switch 1, which unfortunately means that any glitch categories that existed in the past will no longer be able to be played on the Switch 2, since it forces you to update those games to the current patch to even be able to play them. The second issue is the increased amount of spawns from the update, going as far as to have 32 Pokemon on the screen at once. And with the route being so involved in getting from point A to point B as fast as possible, what used to be manageable encounter dodges has turned into a fight for our lives, with the worst spots being open fields, deserts, snowy mountains, and the absolutely ridiculous trip inside of Area Zero. But there's one final issue that was present upon the Switch 2's release that would set the stage for the race to achieve the world's first sub-5 Scarlet and Violet speedrun on the English leaderboards. Because at the time of the Switch 2 launch, the turbo controller that every Pokemon speedrunner was using didn't actually connect to it for one reason or another, which meant we either had to pay for another controller or take the L and destroy our hands with 5 hours of text mashing. But none of those issues would stop the now former Japanese world record holder himself, Halqery, from trying. getting his Japanese world record shattered by an insane 30 minutes, Halqery had some pretty high hopes for playing on English as well. While Japanese text scrolls by a lot quicker, both languages start and end their speedrun timers in completely different spots. And since English cuts out both of those starting and ending points from the Japanese category, Halqery figured that a sub 5 time would be pretty free to achieve on his first go. And so the plan became to stay at my place and try and see how close he could get to beating it, then I would try and take over in the morning. But what I woke up to the next morning was not what any of us expected. You remember when I mentioned the lack of turbo controllers being a big issue? Well, when I found that out, I ended up turning my house upside down to try and find one that did work. But what we didn't know is the one I found had a bad joystick that caused Halqery to walk instead of run when pressing forward as far as possible. So even though he was able to speed up text mashing, he likely lost what could have amounted to a sub 5 to all the moments where you're forced to run instead of bike, like the giant walk at the end of the game in Area 0.
Like, I think this controller literally is just not going full speed. Oh, it doesn't seem like it's going full speed at 4 on the stick. I was turning the camera sideways and it looked like I was running faster. I'm literally about to win. So if this cutscene ends in 1 minute... Yeah, no fucking way. 7:58, 59. Happy 5 hours to those who celebrate. Yippee. Well, it's a new world record, but like... minute 41. Where can I save that?
While Halqery never blamed me for this happening, I definitely felt a bit guilty as he went off to sleep while I took up the mantle in his place. And so, I made it my mission to make sure that our normal turbo controllers could work by scavenging the depths of Reddit of all places for a solution that ended up working for everyone in the community that wanted to try for the race for sub 5. All of which would start on the exhausting morning of June 6, 2025 with me, Etiquette, and Crisisaurus. When it came to me and Etiquette, we were part of the folks that had given up on Scarlet and Violet, so we kinda went into this with only a bit of practice before the Switch 2, with a bit of rust holding us back. But one person who never truly gave up on Scarlet and Violet speedruns was Crisisaurus.
I'm Crisisaurus. I've only started speedrunning in 2022. Later that year, Scarlet and Violet came out, and I pretty much wanted to be one of the best Scarlet and Violet runners because I just liked the game.
And given how much dedication Crisis had given to the game, he knew pretty much all the hidden strategies, including playing on Pokemon Violet, a game that was ultimately considered slower than Scarlet on the Nintendo Switch 1.
It was kind of at the point where Violet was lagging 1 minute every hour. It had nothing to do with Miraidon specifically. I think that was like a rumor that was kind of spread around. There have been tests from people who tested like similar cutscenes, but Miraidon was not present and Violet was still running worse. Initially, I was probably gonna think about doing Scarlet first. I think it was then Corolio. He decided to do a run on Violet. He went live. His run died, but what I saw was his run was at least on par with his Scarlet run until that issue happened. But it gave me the confidence to think that I think the issue is fixed. But I always knew that if Violet would perform the same, Violet should always be faster. And I also realized that someone has to try it, right? 3, 2, 1. Wow, everything is just so smooth. Jesus, that's fast. Oh my Jesus. Never have I thought that I would save 42 seconds on the first split.
But despite all these moments of relief and joy from time save, Crisis running on Violet came with the issues of having to adapt for version-exclusive fights like the Ground Titan, the Area 0 Paradox Pokemon, and the final fight versus Turo based off of if he got good stats on the main Pokemon used for the speedrun, Flamigo.
Exception of Iron Moth and Iron Valiant, every single Pokemon that Toro brings out has randomizing, which means you have to assume the worst. I did find a very quick solution, which is if I pick up a few small candies, I can actually gain level thresholds at specific points. That allows me to buy less proteins and also like run less carbos, which should hopefully help me solve the issue if I did run low IV Flamigo.
But while Crisis was fully prepared, me and Etiquette were running into issues from all the rust we had accumulated over the years, and as time ticked on, our runs were slowly pushing further and further away from the big goal of the first sub 5.
It didn't feel like you would quite there at sub 5 pace. Like, I noticed like a lot of like mistakes that you were making. One of the bigger ones, you forgot to rearrange the move order, so double kick was still slot 1, and I don't know, I think that may have like in the very end costed you your run.
Miss! What the am I doing, dude?
I think Etiquette, the mistake what he made was he accidentally sold the close combat TM.
I sold close combat. Oh, the run's just over, isn't it? Because Flamigo doesn't learn it, does he? Yeah, he doesn't learn it. GG. We lost.
And that is pretty much run over at that point because you need the power of close combat against many of the fights in the endgame.
And with both our failures pushing us completely out of contention for the sub 5 race, it would be up to Crisis to keep it together where we fell apart.
Ortega, I got the best possible time being sub 5. Still had in the back of the mind, this is still Scarlet and Violet. For all I know, the game could just crash and be like, nah, screw you. It's not the first time it's happened. I was more thinking about in the run itself, like still making sure that I do the movement correctly, making sure that I do the fights correctly. Then my splits kind of got fudged a little bit when we got to Clavel, but I knew whatever time I got at Nimona, that would be then accurate to what time I would be then expecting by the end of the game. Then I had a bit of an issue with Penny. Oh, wait. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, it's not quite bad. It just have to. Oh, now just missed thunder for once. I shouldn't die. Good. Don't get paralyzed. Shoot. I have one full restore to save myself. Why did I mess this up? It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, we missed. All right. So obviously, being awake from 9 a.m., you're starting to get tired at that point. You're 4 hours into a speed run and you start to do mistakes. Then it was like, okay, focus up now. Just don't do anything horrible or bad or terrible. It's just there, right? I just had to watch T-Pat's Violet run very quickly to remember how to do the final movement in Area 0. You drop off at that fence, then there's a rock that you can land, and I was able to do it exactly as intended. Hey, the trigger still works!
And all that was left to do would be to decide whether or not to play it safely or risk it all with new strategies on the final battle against Professor Turo.
I decided to take what at least was known in the routes as the normal route, that it is the slower version of the fight. I just didn't want to throw the run at that point. I didn't want to just be like, let's go double kick the bundle.
Do you think watching me misclick on my final fight helped you lock in a little bit on yours?
Yes, absolutely. Like, seeing you misclick made me kind of focus a lot more on making sure that I click acrobatics on Iron Valiant, because I knew that's the one thing that can go wrong. All right, we're through. This could even potentially be a 53 because we're gonna do Miraidon instead of Koraidon, which is a lot faster because Power Gem is a faster move. GG's. I can now just mash A for the rest of the game, assuming Power Gem is in slot 1. And... it's done. Holy smokes. It's not just sub 5, it's like 554. I just can't believe it. Like, genuinely. And this is just the beginning of the Switch 2 era. There is a lot more to come from here. First sub 5 in English was definitely like something I was very much happy about. But I know for a fact that this run can be a lot better. Like, I fumbled Penny, some shopping menus could have been done, and now that I realize just how powerful the Switch 2 is, I think that I want to see if I can get closer to 450 and maybe even break that.
If there was anyone who deserved the first sub-5 English speedrun of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the fact that Crisis was the one to do it is a very poetic and deserved thing in the history of a speedrun that most people had given up on. And while it did take a $500 pay-to-win console to bring this speedrun justice, I don't see why it should matter when people playing the game were gonna buy the console anyways. To us, it's become a bit of a healing experience that is slowly erasing the turmoil and hardship of our Switch 1 Scarlet and Violet speedruns into what many consider to be a top 3 Pokemon speedrun of all time. One that's so alive that tons of world records have already been broken, with multiple people having breached the sub-5 barrier, including me! That's right, baby! Now, given it's only been a short amount of time since the Switch 2's release, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered with testing, like if Violet is actually faster than Scarlet, and just how low we can get this game's time down to with this new hardware. But at the very least, we can say that the console saves an entire 30 minutes of time save across both languages. And to those that don't own one, we've already split the leaderboards between consoles after seeing this, so you can compete on either console. Then finally, with the game's activity at an all-time high, we're now at a point where the next race is to break the sub 450 barrier in both English and Japanese. So if you want to see who breaks it first, check out these channels on the screen, and I'll also be there to report to you all who eventually does, so subscribe here as well if you want an update to that on the near future. Special thanks to CB for supporting me on Patreon. If you want some hilarious behind the scenes moments with me and Halqery trying for the sub 5 that they'll be getting, you can get that as well as director's commentary for all my future and past videos as well for only $5 a month.